So they can talk all
We might have to listen to what, 6 minutes or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this Tuesday, December 17th agenda session. I now call us to order. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? It's been moved and, do I hear a second?
Yeah.
Thank you. I guess, yep, okay, it's not formal, but that'll work. It gets the message across. I love it. Right, okay, now we'll move on into ordinances on final reading, which has already been read into records. Is there any items that need addressing at this moment? Councilwoman Coonrod, you got anything you want to share with us? Okay, thank you very much, Councilwoman. Now we'll move on to resolutions. 7A, please.
A resolution approving short-term vacation rental application number 19 STVR 00147 for property located at 3202 Pinewood Avenue.
Seeing no questions, let's move on to 7B.
A resolution approving short-term vacation rental application number 19 STVR 00163 for property located at 214 Baker Street.
Let's now please read 7C.
A resolution approving short-term vacation rental application number 19 STVR 00164 for property located at 3059 St. Elmo Avenue.
Thank you. 7D, please.
A resolution authorizing the Chief Information Officer to enter into a blanket agreement with IT Pipes LLC for the purchase of sewer assessment inspection products and services for 1 year beginning January 2020 and ending December 31st, 2020, with 2 optional annual renewals for an amount not to exceed $50,000 per contract per year.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That concludes this part of our agenda session. There is no departmental report. We will now move on to Public Works and Transportation Committee. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any questions? All in favor by the sign of aye. Opposers, nay. Motion carries. Mr. Holland.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon, Justin.
Council.
You have something?
We do. Thank you for the opportunity to present. We do have a special presentation today from Jeff Rose about an important renewable energy project at the wastewater treatment plant. You'll see in just a minute an opportunity for our wastewater treatment plant to not only save energy but become more efficient with one project and many other projects that are in line with consent decree projects and non-consent decree projects, meaning these are just efficiencies that we've discovered through some of the projects that we've investigated and opportunities for improving technology at the treatment plant. And you understand that I know all of you are interested in saving money. This is certainly an opportunity to do that, but it's also an environmentally friendly project that aligns itself with the Better Buildings Challenge that the city has been involved in for a long time. Our treatment plant uses, I think we are one of the EPB's largest consumers of of power in the region. So the treatment plant and all of its pump stations use a significant amount of energy, which is why we've investigated and proposed several projects that will align itself with reduced energy costs and increased savings over time. So I want Jeff to present on the project that is on your agenda for tonight's approval and ask questions if anything comes to mind. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Lower that a little bit. Yeah, it's good to be here to present this project to you guys. We have been working on it for a while, and as you know, it's been in our budget a while, and it's been a priority project for the mayor for for a couple of years, and we're glad to be able to take this next step along the path of energy efficiency and reducing our energy load. And you can go to the next slide. Do I have I got the clicker, okay. Let's see, did that do it? No. I'll push the arrows, I guess, is that right? So we're going to just give you a little project overview and the status of where we're at now, and then some of the benefits. Let's see if I can, yeah, there we go. The original project was designed and conceived to be a 10 acres of solar panels out at the plant, fixed axis design. That just means that we don't try to follow the sun. It just sits there, and which turns out to be the most efficient for us. We would use all the power internally at the plant. We have a budget of $5.25 million, and the initial design included approximately 9,350 watt solar panels, which would create a 3.2 megawatt facility. And this would reduce our energy usage at the plant by approximately 8%. And this is just a little drawing on a map, aerial map showing the approximate location. This was beforehand, and it pretty much follows this same location. You can see the river over there on the left, and then on the right, some of our treatment facilities, some of our clarifiers. And the little white box up there is our training center that we do a lot of training in. So it's going to be right behind our training center. And we did receive 6 high-quality bids. And what we considered high quality was these 6 bidders met our requirements as far as equipment they selected, the team that they selected to do it. They also, when we bid it out, we designed the site work itself and then left some of the solar package somewhat flexible so they could give us the most efficient project possible based on performance and based on our parameters, the site we had. So the selection criteria, because everybody ended up being a good bidder, there was not much difference in the teams and the equipment they used, but the final criteria was how cheap can they get us the power. Let's see, I'll just read it. Selection criteria was for the lowest dollars per kilowatt hour in the first year of production, and then also the lowest dollars per kilowatt hour in the 25-year output of this facility. So Inman Solar is a recommended vendor, and they had the overall lowest price for the first year, and then the overall lowest price for the 25-year output. And the way we bid this to enable them to be flexible in their panel selection and just giving us the best deal they could, we came up with 30% more output from the system, which is great. Just over the time frame of a year when we started the bids and the documents to this time, technology improved that much, and they also just were able to find the right panels to make it work. And so it's a huge increase, 30% more electrical output. So what we ended up with was 9,300 panels at 425 watts each, which turns out to be a 4.0 megawatt facility. And we're estimating this can reduce our energy now, instead of 8%, we're talking about 11 to 12%. So it is really a big difference. And this slide just shows some of the details of the bid itself. The base bid's $4.356 million, with the 1-year projected output of around 6 million kilowatt hours. That gave us a cost per kilowatt hour of 72 cents, and that was the lowest of all 6 bids. Then the lifetime solar output for 25 years was 140,000 megawatt hours, which translates to about 3.1 cents per kilowatt hour, which was also the lowest of the 6 bids we received. And that compares, if you compare to, we pay something like a little over 7 cents per kilowatt hour right now. So you can see how it adds up. It'll add up pretty quickly if we're just paying 3.1 cents. So we also added an alternative 5-year O&M at $100,000, which brought the total bid price to $4.456 million. Then we added a $450,000 extra, what's the word I'm trying to use? Oh, contingency, yeah, thanks. For about, which brought the total price that you'll see in your resolution to a little over $4.9 million. So that's what we're asking to approve tonight.
Wait, Councilwoman Burrs, you like to have a question?
I do. Are you heading towards self-sufficiency?
Well, this will bring us about 11 to 12%. And let me just switch to, well, that's not really what I wanted, but we've got 2 or 3 other projects right now, one on our EQ basins, which we're looking at could probably save us another 12 or 13% overall on our power bill. So that's now 25%. We've got some things we're looking at doing on solids, which could save a tremendous amount of power. While we're not looking completely off the grid just yet, we're moving that way. I mean, we could be 30, 40% off the grid within the next 5 years or so.
So I guess what is this? What fund is this coming from?
It's the just ISS, Waste Resources budget. Yeah. Fund
So I know
balance.
I know the airport, I believe, is self-sufficient, selling energy back to EPB.
Mhm.
Would it be wiser to spend more money now and be closer to self-sufficiency since costs will be going up? I know your fund is pretty healthy. I'm just wondering
Mhm.
if it would be better to do, since you have these folks,
Mhm.
would it be wiser to do a little more now?
Well, what we're trying to do is fit this in. One of the things that came about when we first had this project come up was we had a certain amount of money in, and then the mayor challenged us and said, well, how big can you make it? So we started looking at how big can we make it. given
You
our
started
site
with how much
parameters.
money you have,
Right.
instead of how big the,
We had a budget. We said we'll do
Okay.
this kind of demonstration project, and then we said, well, let's just make it as big as we can on this site, given the parameters. There's some wetlands mitigation that has to be done. We also are saving room for expansion in the area. So while there's more things we could do, there's some places that have solar panels on top of basins and things like that, floating solar panels. There's a whole range of things. Generally, they're more expensive, and for now, this seemed like the best option to go with to start, and then we'll, build from there is the idea.
well, let me ask a question out of my ignorance. Is it possible to make just the treatment plant? I know you're going all over the place with this. Is it possible to make just the treatment plant self-sufficient?
It's possible, and that there are plants around the world that are self-sufficient, and in maybe 1 or 2 in the U.S. But we use such a tremendous amount of power.
I know.
It's a solar. I mean, we would need 10 times the space, so that's another whatever that is, maybe 50, 60 million for solar panels. But it's also now it's 100 acres, 150 acres, something like that, which we don't have. We don't have that kind of property. We also have things we're doing with our solids. We generate methane, and that's one of the things we're looking into in the future that will.
So
we
your
can generate
biggest
energy.
drawback is you don't have the land.
Don't have the land sufficient to do a solar project that would provide all of our power. Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Welcome.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Vice Chairman Henderson.
Jeff, what kind of cost savings are we looking at over the 25-year period that you've got projected here?
Yeah, I'll show you the next slide here. When we talk about 12% of our power bill, that's something, that would be something like $350,000 a year. And so, yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood. So we're looking at a 14-year payback till we get to zero. And then, you know, we're in the black after that. So this is one project, you know, many projects we do don't really have payback. So this is one that actually pays back and makes sense for us long term.
So are you projecting in 25 years a $4 million payback? Am I reading that slide right?
A cumulative payback, yeah, somewhere around $4 million. And, you know, the efficiency of the thing goes down after that, but it's not like goes in half. It's more like, you know, 10% or something. So there's still a tremendous value even at age 25, and we would look at 25 years and say, well, how can we make it better? You know, there'll be a lot better technology, I'm sure, by then. So, yep.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Carry on.
Okay, so I just have one more slide here that just a summary of the benefits. 14-year payback, protection from rising energy costs. There is some stats here about emissions savings, approximately 75,000 metric tons of just emissions of various kinds that would come from electrical plant. Average annual greenhouse gas offset of 500 homes, and then our power usage is reduced by 12%, and then this percentage of solar power would grow as we drop our power usage even further with more projects. So, yeah, that's the end. Any other questions?
Councilman Gilbert.
On this program, are you be using backup lights, backup batteries on the panel?
Right now, we don't have any backup batteries that I know of. That's right, Chris? Yeah, I was thinking we didn't. There's been, you know, we've talked to EPB and some others about a research projects into that sort of thing, and we haven't done it yet. It's a bigger cost, but when we have this in place, we'll have the ability to maybe work with some folks to see if that makes sense, you know, to do that kind of thing. Generally, we're going to use all the power this generates, and there won't be, because it's a fairly low portion of our power, we don't necessarily need a battery, but it would be an opportunity to do some research and see how it works. There's other sites we could definitely use that kind of technology at.
Okay, so the days that we don't have a lot of sun, we'd be using just regular power, correct?
Correct. Right.
Okay. How much more would it cost to get batteries to make this work?
Yeah. I'm not really sure about the cost of batteries. We haven't looked into it. And, you know, like I said, generally, we're just going to be using the power. It's going to go straight into the grid. We've got so much power demand out there that there'll never be a time for now that we would want to store the energy and use it later. But we just haven't foreseen that as necessary at the moment. But it could be something in the future that we do, or possibly for a pump station. That kind of application could be a good application for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. Jeff, you said 350,000 a year savings is what we're looking at from our.
That's approximate. Yeah.
Have
Yes.
have you provided for us the slide with the comparison of our monthly EPB bill and in comparison so that we could see that ratio sliding down and how it fluctuates? If you don't have it, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, we don't have that at the moment, but we could definitely come up with something like that.
Just so I compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. But annual maintenance replacement panel cost, is that all written into the contract, or is we relying on the contingency to pick up the tab on that?
We added the alternate $100,000, which is a 5-year operation and maintenance agreement. That does all that. And there's various things they check and maintain, and they make sure the power output of the panels maintains itself, over that, the guaranteed life. So those are the kind of things they take care of for the first 5 years. Then we'd have an option to re-up on that, for 5 more, or maybe we do it ourselves at that point.
Okay, so we have a service contract on the panels, basically.
We do, and it came with this bid. We had them bid.
Is that
that-
100,000 a year?
It's 100,000
Total
for
the
5 years. Yeah.
Total for the 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
20,000 a year, which is
Great.
seemed like a good bargain from what we've investigated.
Very good. Chairman, that's
Thank you, Councilman Gilbert.
We still gonna use backup generators, correct?
Oh, yes, we have quite a few generators.
And these, will this intertwine with the generators if they have to
It
be
will.
used?
It will, this will feed into the grid, and that's part of the construction of the thing, to make sure it feeds in the right way. And then, it will give us some reliability, actually. If power's down, we'll have at least some power that can feed into the grid, and then our backup generators kick on as power shuts down.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Okay. Councilman Ledford.
sorry, Chairman.
That's okay.
A lot of information at one time. If at any time the panels aren't performing to the need that we have, will we have that full-on switch with EPB ready to go at all as a backup?
Yeah, we would have our same meters, our same switch gear, everything will be there exactly the same. We just won't use quite as much power from them.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
So that's
it will
not
still be
going
there.
offline?
No.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Any other information you'd like to share with us
That's all I've got at the moment.
at the moment? All right, thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Okay, Madam Clerk, we'll move on now to items under Public Works. We'll start with Resolution 7E.
Resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to award contract number W17024201 MBWWTP Renewable Energy Project to Inman Solar Incorporated of Atlanta, Georgia, in the amount of $4,456,667, plus a contingency amount of $450,000, for a total amount of $4,906,667.
Okay, thank you. That was the item, the presentation we just heard. I see no further questions. Now let's move on to 7F.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to award contract number W17021201 South Chickamauga Creek 1, Phase 2 to SAC Construction LLC of O'Fallon, Missouri, in the amount of $2.5 million, plus a contingency amount of $125,000, for a total amount of $2,625,000.
Seeing no questions, let's move on to 7G.
A resolution authorizing payment of the annual City Works software maintenance support to Hamilton County in the amount of $34,075.01 for the period of November 11, 2019 to November 10, 2020.
Thank you. 7H.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a public-private partnership agreement with the Charles H. Coolidge National Medal of Honor Heritage Center, Inc. in Hamilton County to reconstruct a public sidewalk with new brick pavers to be sold for fundraising purposes near the entrance of the museum located at 2 Aquarium Way, which will be 100% privately funded.
Okay, we have Councilman Gilbert.
Will there be any trees planted near these bricks? The reason I say that because currently we have trees planted by bricks and the bricks is coming up. So is trees going near this?
So there are some trees that are currently near this. There's no plans to remove those trees right now, but there is a significant amount of work, and I'm familiar with all of the brick pavers that tend to move along sidewalks where bricks or where trees sometimes push those up. That is a maintenance item that we plan for. I don't think there's any plans for additional trees.
So this, it won't affect these when we're finna put down the tree we currently have?
No, sir. This is, if you're familiar with the front entrance of the museum, it's, I don't know, probably 20 feet from the nearest tree, maybe a little bit further.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, this is such an exciting project, and I hope that we can all get behind. This is a fundraiser, and hopefully we can all participate in. Justin, one of the things, and this sort of highlights, I guess, the need to look at that whole plaza for bricks that need to be replaced. I know there's several places where there's tripping hazards. What do we have planned in the future for addressing, making that whole plaza where it's not as much of a trip hazard as what it is now?
That's a good question. So typically this time of year, during the winter season, when the plaza is not so busy, we go in and steady up or level some of those tripping hazards, and that's a current plan now. So we have evaluated that recently for the grand opening of the museum that is happening in February. So we'll be making some improvements, and that's typical this time of year for us to evaluate those.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Ledford?
Thank you, Chairman. Justin, what's the time frame on this pending and approval from council?
We'll work with the museum. The museum has presented some plans to us, so we'll work with them. It's a fundraising project for the implementation part.
So we'll wait for, I guess, some funds to accumulate before construction begins. Does that make sense?
So, I believe it is.
Is there,
I'd
let
have
me
to go back
rephrase
and
it. Is there a
look.
trigger amount?
getting a-
Is there a trigger amount that we're looking for to start?
I'm getting a head nod from Councilman Smith, who
Yeah.
may recall that piece of the agreement. So,
Yeah. Okay. So there is a trigger, a dollar amount that we're looking for.
yeah, we're working with the museum with the
Okay.
agreement. This is authorization for us to enter into the agreement for them to use that space.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions for Public Works? Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, council members.
Okay, well, we have one item under transportation for Tuesday, for today, actually. Madam Clerk, would you please read 7I, please?
A resolution authorizing the Department of Transportation to erect commemorative secondary street name signs on Glass Street from Dodson Avenue to Hardy Elementary School, designating said portions of Glass Street as W.C. Hunter Parkway.
Okay, seeing no questions, that concludes this portion on the Public Works and Transportation. We have an item of public safety. Chairman Smith.
All right, we'll call to order the Public Safety Committee. Have a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Opposed is nay. Thank you very much. Mr. Reisman, if you wouldn't mind joining us, please, sir. Just go ahead and give us a brief on what these revisions are, and we'll see if the council has any questions or issues with what's being presented, sir.
Good afternoon. I have placed before you an ordinance, actually two copies of the ordinances. One is the ordinance as it will be before you when it gets put on the agenda. The other one is what we call a red line version, which will tell you the changes that have been done to make it a little easier to understand what's happening. The first two sections, section 1 and 2, relate to what are called temporary permits. Let me step back one. Right. These are typically for special events. There are 3 different permits. There's the regular permit for either on-premise or off-premise or combined. That's a permanent permit. There is a caterer's permit. And the third permit is the special event permit, which is called a temporary permit. They're good for 30 days, but they're only good for specific type of events that occur. You just can't go and say, let me have a 30-day permit. And that, in fact, is made clear in Section 2 of this ordinance before you. The first section removes the temporary permits from the $250 permit requirement fee. There's been some discussion over the last 3 years, and I'm sorry that Councilman Mitchell's not here because I believe he was the person that approached me about it, as well as the Open Spaces, Jonathan Sussman has approached me about it, that simply wasn't appropriate to charge $250 when we're charging that for a permanent permit for these temporary permits, which are generally 1 day long. We do not put near as amount of effort and energy into issuing a temporary permit as we do for a permanent permit. And I believe it's felt, and Jonathan can talk to that if you wish to hear from him, that by putting in a lesser amount will actually generate more of these special permits and will also help us, as well as the police department, in order to regulate what's happening in our city. So the first section basically moves the special permits away from the 250. The second section of the ordinance puts it at $100 a day for the first day, and then $50 for each additional day, up to $250. Once again, that's in that 30-day period. So, for example, nightfall would still be $250 in that 30-day period because they have more than whatever it is, 3 events. So that time, Friends of the Festival for Riverbend will also be $250 because they'll have more than 3 days worth. What also in Section 2 does is it makes 2 things clear. Number one, it makes it clear who can get one of these special permits. And this is tracking what the TABC has for their temporary permits. It also makes clear who can get a permit on public property. Public property permits can only be gotten, temporary permits, by nonprofits. And it makes it clear here. There is one exception, and that's a festival permit. And that's something also from the TABC, that a for-profit can get a permit to be on public property. I believe it's called Moon Festival. Moon Festival is an example. That was a for-profit organization. They were in our park, but they had the festival permit, and they got a permit from us. That's all what Section 2 does. Section 3 makes a very, very minor change to the distance requirements that are presently in the code. We have a wholesale brewer. In other words, they're brewing beer there, and they're putting in, I believe, cans, and it's their wholesale operation. And they want to have a tasting room. They're in M1 zone. M1 is where we want to have a brewery. And they're 200 feet away from any type of structure that would otherwise disqualify them to do their brewing, and that's our schools, churches, and things of that order. And you'll see that in Section B. For the limited purpose of the tasting room, the board and I are suggesting for them, if it's a wholesale operation and they want to have a tasting room, as long as they meet the 200-foot requirement rather than the normal 500-foot requirement, and are in M1, that would be sufficient. And I just think it makes sense, because that's where we want these manufacturers to be. Section 4 is simply cleaning up something. This is the Station Street, where we are allowing, we have allowed, after the state declared that we were going to basically allow open containers on the street. When this was first passed, we referred to a statute in the code that defined what State Street was. That code section changes every year. And rather than try to catch it up, we're just going to say State Street. So everything's exactly the same as it appears today on Section  but we just put State Street in rather than the code section. And last, which is under section 5, is really the most important thing that I'm here today. If an entity has a TABC license, in other words, if they're selling wine and they're selling alcohol, spirits, their servers are required to get a TABC servers permit. We have no requirement in the city for any type of education or training for entities that only sell beer. And this has been a real sticking point in front of the beer board. They ask people, are you going to do training? And people say they will. Whether they do or not, we don't know. We have no enforcement ability. This part, which is a new section 589, tracks what TABC is doing for their server permit. There's only one real difference in it, and that is we have a number of people in town that do actually train beer sales when the entity actually wants to do it. And we've included them in the permit process. So after 60 days after this has been adopted, if you're going to sell or serve beer, you either have to have a TABC server permit, which will cover most of the people because they have wine and spirits, or you have to have a TABC server permit or be trained by one of the approved trainers. And it is our hope that everybody will do a better job of checking IDs to make sure people are over 21 or over. And that's it. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Well, thank you very much.
Nah, don't go anywhere.
No.
Councilman Gilbert.
You ain't get away that quick. You mentioned that
I was all straight and did it, and I was going to go. Okay.
on public property, you saying you have to be a nonprofit for the beer, correct?
Also for alcohol and wine. The exception is if you have a caterer can actually cater on public property.
What about festivals? I know it's got an A and a B
Right.
listed.
The big festivals like Moon River or Moon, whatever it is, they have a new permit, and that from TABC, and that permit is a festival permit. So they will be able, if they get the festival permit, they will be able to serve on public property. Part of getting the festival permit is having the city approve it, and we had no procedure for doing that. This will now set forth that procedure.
So if the state, first of all, have to give that festival the permission to do in the first place, correct?
Actually, it's the other way around. The Moon, is it Moon River?
That's
I
basically.
want to say it. Moon River had to come to us first. They had to ask the beer board permission to allow them to get the festival permit. Once we gave them permission, they then went back to the state and got the festival permit. But you had to have both in order to serve beer on the public property.
So do you have some type of regulations for the city standpoint of who qualifies for festival, who not qualified?
It's the same as any other special permit.
I'm saying, is there any,
We do background checks,
right?
and they have to present to the board what they're going to do, and I have to convince them. The main point that the board has always been interested in is what are these special events going to do about ensuring that no one under 21 gets any beer or alcohol in this case. And they do ask them very closely, and most of these places do armbanding. They also have police around. That's the main concern, that and the training. And they will have to have training too, even on the special events.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Council Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. So Keith, I was a little curious on the M1 zoning allowing the beer tasting section.
Right. M1 is the place we want to have
Sure.
our big, industrial doesn't sound the word, but the brewers, where they have their operations for wholesale. If you notice, it has to be a wholesale operation. It can't be a beer on premise type of thing.
So they're
They
not
gotta be
selling.
bottling, they gotta be canning, and selling off-premise to other entities, to retail. If they do that, they will now be able to have a tasting room.
Tasting room, okay. That's where my question was. Is there any limit on the tasting room, like a 2-beer minimum or something?
No,
like- There's no limit?
It's no limit, but once again, you must remember that we have provisions in the beer code on over-service. And if, I think you all get the agendas and the minutes. We do a fairly good job of policing over-service the best we can with the limited staff, and this is the police staff that we have. If I'm not mistaken, coming up Thursday will be an over-service person.
In the tasting
violation.
room, are they charging for the,
It's
Or is
immaterial
it
for
free?
this, but it was clear to me that even if they gave it away free, they had to have a permit.
okay, so it makes no difference in
Yeah.
there? Okay. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, sir. Councilman Byrd.
Thank you, Chair. Keep the section A, under section 5A. That does not, I'm just making sure I read this correctly. Is that gas stations and people that are already in business, do they have to go back or retrain?
Yes, if you'll notice on the effective date, this will take effect 60 days. This particular provision, Section 5, will take effect 60 days after the city council if they pass it. It's our intention that everybody gets trained.
So every service station everywhere in Chattanooga, Tennessee will have to go get this?
If they are selling and serving beer.
Gotcha. And how, when it says right here, the section shall not apply to any entity that possesses a license from the Tennessee Act, certified as a responsible vendor, how do you become a responsible vendor? Like, explain it to me.
Okay, yes. The state of Tennessee runs a program for retail sales of beer, which is called the Responsible Vendor Program. In order to qualify, all of your staff that sells and serves beer have to be trained.
Right.
That's the main qualification. We have a number of gas station type areas, quick marts, whatever you want to call them, that are responsible vendors.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no need to get anything in addition other than the responsible vendor, as well as the state preempts the city from regulating and requiring training for anybody that does have a TABC server permit or is a responsible vendor. So even if we wanted to regulate it, we were unable to do so. But there's no need.
Do you have a list of those responsible vendors?
John, is John here? Unfortunately, there are very few. No, I don't. I'll be glad to get it for you. John, how many responsible vendors? How many responsible vendors do we have? It's not very many.
Responsible vendors, I do not have an accurate count on that. It's usually some of the bigger chains like the Circle K's and Masco's will go through that.
Mm-hmm.
I only know of one independent store that will do it, so I'll several different steps that will do it. And most of your smaller stores will not.
But not have that. Thank you.
And consequently, they don't get training.
Say again?
And consequently, they don't get training.
Right.
So that's why what we're trying to do.
Okay. Thank you.
Good, sir. Councilman Gilbert.
Just to ask, a person that's got a one-day permit to sell beer, they don't fall under this, do they?
Yes, they will.
So are you saying that any festival that we actually have, anybody that's selling beer must go through this program?
Right.
Is there a
Either-
cost for this program?
Okay, well, if you go online and you do it through the state, the online program was $29. The state charges $20. I believe that our local people that do the program, it's less than that. But, for example, Riverbend, they do their own training. And it's done by somebody that also does training for the general public. So for the big festivals like that, there's not going to be any charge because they're doing it for charity. And the people who train them will be authorized trainers.
Once you've been trained the first time, will that carry on from
5
5
years,
years?
just like the TABC server's license.
All right, thank you.
Keith, I've got a follow-up question. Considering the scope of the addition here, when you're talking about training and the cost and who it'll cover, the purpose of the training for the beer board or their concern is just to ensure that anybody selling or serving beer is trained.
Right, and it's on two levels. Number one, that they understand our regulations, but really number two, that they can make sure that they don't serve to under 21-year-olds. That's it. Plus the overserve, that's covered in the training as well.
So if you have businesses that come before you that are in violation, what good is the training at that point in time if they've already had a violation? Do they go back through training?
If they've been trained and they have a violation, I don't know. They're not required in this, but certainly the board can ask for that as in their discussion to see what type of a sanction they'll give.
Is that a beer board discussion as to this individual or this company has been before us 2 or 3 times? Clearly, your employees are not taking the training seriously. You've got to go back through training. That's a decision the beer board can make.
Right, that's the decision. But in your extreme case, I think if anybody came before the board 3 times in a year or two, they may be facing revocation, not even a suspension.
Okay,
But
so you
on a
can
normal case,
you can mandate retaking
Right.
training.
right.
Okay. All right. I have no other questions, and I see no further lights. All good? Thank you, Keith. Appreciate it. All right. If there is nothing further for the Public Safety Committee, we are adjourned till 6.